I was standing at the cremation center when I heard my mother-in-law's voice behind me, low, deliberate, just loud enough for Gavin to hear. "Don't tell her where the baby was buried," she said. "She doesn't deserve to know." I didn't turn around. I didn't speak. My body went still. Gavin didn't argue. He didn't flinch. He just replied, "I had them do it quietly. It's done." And that was it. My daughter was gone, and they buried her like a secret. I stood there holding nothing. No ashes, no marker, not even a folded condolence card. The man I married, the woman who raised him, they handled everything while I floated through my grief, too broken to ask questions, too dazed to realize I wasn't being told the truth. That moment should have broken me completely, and maybe it would have, if it weren't for my son. 3 days later, I sat at the kitchen table with a sealed envelope from the hospital nurse in my hands. It was marked postnatal care in a shaky pen. I hadn't opened it yet. I didn't know if I could. My son Luca walked into the room. He's 12. Quiet, always watching. He stopped when he saw the envelope, his eyes flicking to my hands, then to my face. "Mom," he said, I have the real location." I stared at him. "I followed Dad. I know where she is." The words didn't make sense at first. My ears were ringing. My stomach turned to ice. He sat across from me, serious and calm, like he'd been waiting to tell me. "I followed him that night. After you went to bed, he left with a box. I stayed back at first, but something felt weird, so I rode my bike behind him. I saw everything." My fingers tightened around the envelope, but I didn't open it. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly. "You saw where he took her?" I asked. He nodded. "He didn't know I was there, but I remember everything. And take you." In that second, I understood what Gavin had taken from me. Not just my daughter, not just a decision. He had stolen my right to grieve, to know, to remember. He buried her alone, as if I had no place in her story, as if I wasn't her mother. And somehow it was my son, our son, who held the truth they tried to hide. I looked at Luca. His eyes were steady. He didn't look away. There was no panic in him, no fear, only the quiet weight of a boy who had watched too much and waited too long to speak. He didn't ask me if I wanted to know. He didn't need to. He knew I did. That moment, sitting at the table, envelope unopened, my son across from me, was when everything changed. Because what Gavin buried wasn't just our daughter, it was the truth. And now I was going to dig it back up. Before everything fell apart, I thought we were doing okay. Gavin and I had been married for 12 years. We met in college. He was focused, ambitious, someone who didn't waste time on drama. I liked that. I thought it meant he'd be stable, dependable. And in a lot of ways, he was. We had Luca after 4 years. Being a mother changed me completely. I didn't know how much I could love another human being until I saw his face. Gavin was a good father back then, not soft, but solid. He made Luca laugh. He built forts out of couch cushions and taught him how to ride a bike. I clung to those memories when things started to shift. It was after I got pregnant with Isla that the cracks began to show. It wasn't that Gavin wasn't happy. We both wanted another child, but he changed. He started treating the pregnancy like a medical task, not a miracle. He made charts. He set calendar reminders. He tracked my vitamins and scheduled every appointment. It wasn't cold exactly, but it felt more like managing a project than preparing for a daughter. I told myself that was just his way, that not everyone expresses joy with emotion. When I was 29 weeks along, we went in for a routine ultrasound. I remember everything about that day. The way the technician's face changed, the silence in the room, the doctor's voice explaining that our daughter's heart had stopped. Just like that. No cause, no warning, just silence. I don't remember much after that. They gave me something to help me sleep. I was admitted that night and delivered Isla early the next morning. They let me hold her. She was tiny, but perfect. She had a little crease in her left ear, just like Luca did when he was born. I remember thinking, this is my child. I grew her. I loved her. And now I have to let her go. Gavin didn't cry. He stood beside me, holding my hand, saying nothing. When they asked about cremation or burial, he said he would take care of it. I didn't argue. I didn't have the strength to think beyond that day. When we came home from the hospital, Gavin was already in motion. Phone calls, documents, appointments. He made all the arrangements while I slept most of the day and tried not to feel anything. My mother had passed years earlier, and I didn't want anyone else around, but Marlene insisted on coming. She said we needed support. Support wasn't the word I'd use. Marlene moved into the guest room the day after the funeral home visit. She started folding our laundry and cleaning our kitchen as if she lived there. She brought food and handed it to Luca without looking at me. When we passed in the hallway, she would nod politely but never ask how I was, never said Isla's name. One night, I overheard her on the phone in the dining room. She said, "I knew this would happen. Some women just aren't built to carry children." I froze behind the door and listened. I didn't confront her. I wanted to scream, but the grief kept my mouth shut. I asked Gavin once softly where the ashes were. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "It's taken care of. Let's not open that wound again." And that was the end of the conversation. Luca noticed. He asked why we didn't have a service. I told him sometimes parents do things differently when they're hurting. He didn't seem satisfied, but he didn't press. He started drawing pictures of a baby girl with a tree in the background. I didn't know what it meant. At night, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the empty crib we never took down. I kept her baby blanket folded over the side, untouched. It still smelled like the detergent I had bought just for her. For weeks, I moved through life like a ghost. I went through the motions with Luca, packed his lunch, helped with homework, answered work emails. But something was wrong. There were holes in the story Gavin gave me, gaps in what I was told. Things didn't line up. No paperwork, no urn, no hospital follow-up. When I asked about death certificates or burial records, Gavin always had a reason, a delay, an excuse. And then the day came. The nurse's envelope arrived in the mail. It was small, sealed, with my name handwritten across the front. That was the same day Luca came into the room and told me everything. Luca didn't look scared. That was the part that struck me first. He sat there across from me like he had thought this through, like he had waited until I was ready to hear it. He told me exactly where Gavin had gone that night. He said he waited until Dad pulled out of the driveway, then took his bike and followed from a few blocks behind. I listened, stunned, as my son described how he hid behind the maintenance shed at an old cemetery just outside of town, and watched his father speak to a man in uniform, maybe a groundskeeper. He saw Gavin hand over a small wooden box. "He didn't talk much," Luca said. "He just pointed at a tree near the back fence. Then the man started digging." My chest tightened. What kind of tree? I think it was an oak, big, with two trunks that twist around each other. I wrote down the name of the street and everything. He reached into his hoodie and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It had the address, a hand-drawn map, and a short note in Luca's handwriting. No marker, just initials. I.R. The air in the kitchen felt heavy. I held the paper in both hands like it might fall apart. I wanted to ask 100 questions at once, but I stayed quiet because he deserved that. He had carried this alone. He had followed Gavin without telling anyone, and then waited days to come forward. "You didn't tell your dad?" He shook his head. Number I didn't want him to lie to me. It was strange the way clarity arrived, like someone had just snapped their fingers and the haze I'd been living in vanished. Every delayed answer, every sidestepped question, every time Gavin said, "Not now," or "It's handled," came rushing back with a different meaning. It hadn't been kindness. It hadn't been protection. It had been erasure. I thought of the cold way Marlene had whispered that I didn't deserve to know, the way she looked at me like I was weak, like Isla had never belonged to me in the first place. I thought of the night I lost our daughter and how Gavin took charge before I could even speak. At first, I had been grateful for that. Now I saw it for what it was: control. I stood up from the table and walked down the hall to our bedroom. Gavin was at the desk, staring at a spreadsheet on his laptop. He didn't look up. "I got a letter from the hospital," I said. He blinked slowly, then turned to me. "What did it say?" "I haven't opened it yet, but Luca told me where you buried her." His body stiffened. That's not something he should be talking about. But he is, and I believe him. He closed the laptop. "You were in no condition to make those decisions, Talia. You couldn't even hold a conversation without crying. That's what grieving looks like." I was trying to protect you. You were trying to avoid a mess. You wanted it clean, easy, over. So you handed her off and buried her without me. She's still your daughter. Then why wasn't I allowed to say goodbye? He didn't answer. I'm going there, I said. With or without you. He opened his mouth, but I didn't wait for him to respond. I walked out, grabbed my keys, and called for Luca. We drove out to the cemetery in silence. My hands were shaking on the wheel. My heart beat so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Luca held the map on his lap, directing me as we got closer. When we pulled into the gravel lot, the sun was starting to dip low in the sky. Luca led me down a narrow path behind the main gate, past the marble headstones and polished plaques, to a back corner near the trees. He stopped in front of an old oak with 2 twisted trunks. There, he said, pointing to a patch of disturbed earth. There was no headstone, just a flat, crude piece of slate with 2 small letters carved into it, IR. I knelt in front of it. The ground was still slightly uneven. No flowers, no ribbon, no sign of who she was or how much she was loved. This was what Gavin had done. This was what he thought was best. And in that moment, as the wind moved through the trees and Luca stood beside me in silence, I stopped being afraid. I was going to bring her home. The next morning, I woke up with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in months. Maybe longer. It wasn't peace. It was something harder. Sharper. I had seen where Gavin put our daughter. I had touched the dirt. I had read the initials carved with indifference into a slab of stone that barely counted as a grave marker. It wasn't grief I felt anymore. It was resolve. I walked into the kitchen and found Gavin pouring coffee like it was any other day. I'm moving her, I said. He didn't look up. Moving who? You know who. Talia, don't start this again. This isn't a discussion. I went to the cemetery. I saw what you did. He put the coffee pot down harder than necessary. You had no right to take Luca there. I didn't take him. He took me. He's the one who followed you. He's the one who showed me the truth. Because you wouldn't. I was trying to protect you from this exact kind of emotional spiral. You keep saying protect, but what you really mean is control. You took my daughter and buried her like a secret. Like she didn't matter. I gave her a resting place. You gave yourself an exit. That's what you wanted. To finish it without looking at the wreckage. He stayed silent. I stepped closer. I'm contacting the cemetery. I'll do it through legal channels if I have to. I'll get her ashes and place her somewhere that honors her. Somewhere I can visit. Somewhere she's not buried like a mistake. You're being irrational. Number, I've been quiet. I've been numb. I've let you decide what I was too broken to handle, but I'm not broken anymore. I'm angry. I'm her mother. He rubbed his temples like I was just another problem to solve. I watched him try to gather the words that would fix this, but there weren't any. I already spoke to a lawyer, I said. I have a legal right as her next of kin. You might have arranged it, but you didn't own it. He looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw panic in his eyes. Not because of Isla, not because of what he'd done, but because he was losing the control he built his entire identity on. That night, I sat on Luca's bed while he read from a book he was too old for but still loved. When he finished the chapter, he turned to me. Are we going to bring her here? He asked. We are. Will we have a place for her? Yes. He nodded. Yeah, can I help? Of course. You've already done more than anyone. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and permissions. I had to speak with the cemetery director. He confirmed that Gavin had signed the paperwork himself. My name wasn't listed anywhere. That was the part that nearly made me lose it. They hadn't just excluded me emotionally. They had legally erased me. The director said he would cooperate. Once I filed the right documents, he would release the remains. I sat in my car afterward and cried so hard I had to pull over. Not from sadness, but from the sudden, overwhelming relief of being heard. I found a small garden memorial plot not far from our house. A place with sunlight, flowers, and benches. Children's names lined the pathway. Every one of them remembered. I reserved a spot beneath a cherry blossom tree. The stone would say, Isla Reeve, beloved daughter, forever loved you were never a secret. I let Luca choose a small sculpture to place beside it. He picked an angel holding a rabbit. He said he thought Isla would have liked that. I told him I thought so too. When I gave Gavin the final notice that Isla's remains would be moved within the week, he didn't argue. He only said, "You're really going through with this." I already did. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. He didn't say goodbye. That was the day I knew I was done with the marriage. I didn't need a screaming match or some dramatic breakdown. I just needed truth, and now that I had it, I was never going back to silence again. The morning Isla's remains were scheduled to be moved. The sky was gray but dry. I dressed without hesitation, pulling on dark jeans and the soft gray sweater I had worn the day she was born. I hadn't touched it since. Today it felt right. I wanted something of her close to my skin. I drove to the cemetery alone. Luca stayed home with my friend Kara, who had offered to take him for the afternoon. He had asked to come, but I told him this part was mine. He understood. He always understood more than a child should have to. The groundskeeper was waiting when I arrived. He nodded and walked me to the same tree Luca had shown me, the oak with the twisted trunks. The dirt was already loosened. The stone marker was gone. "We'll treat everything with care," he said. I thanked him and stepped back. I couldn't watch the whole process. Instead, I stood with my arms wrapped tight around myself, eyes fixed on the ground where my daughter had been buried in secret. I whispered her name, Isla. For the first time, it felt like she could hear me. The transfer was done quickly, quietly, respectfully. I signed the last of the documents and took the small urn into my hands. It was heavier than I expected. Warm, somehow. Real. I had her now. Driving to the new memorial garden, I kept one hand on the passenger seat where she rested. Not once did I feel alone. Not once did I doubt the decision. The garden was bright with spring color. Yellow tulips opened in thick rows. Birds chattered in the trees. A woman nearby was tending to her son's plot, arranging tiny soccer balls along the base of the stone. We exchanged a look. No words, just recognition. The spot I had chosen for Isla sat beneath a blooming cherry blossom tree. Pink petals fell slowly, almost rhythmically, as if nature had rehearsed this moment for her. The plaque was already set. Isla Reeve, beloved daughter, forever loved. You were never a secret. I knelt to place the urn beneath the stone. I sat beside her for an hour. I told her about her big brother, how he saved me, how he remembered her when no one else did, how he followed a man in the dark just to keep her from being forgotten. I told her that she would never again be hidden. I cried, but it wasn't the helpless kind of crying that had drowned me for weeks after we lost her. This was something else. This was release. This was goodbye said the way it should have been. That night, Gavin came home late. I was already in the living room packing a small box of documents and photos. I didn't stop what I was doing when he entered. He stood in the doorway watching me. "I saw the email. You went through with it." I did. There was a long pause. Then, "Was it everything you needed?" It was everything she deserved. He stepped into the room, slower than usual. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was making the best decision under impossible circumstances." "I believe that's what you told yourself. But you never asked what I needed. You didn't trust me to grieve. You didn't trust me to mother her." He didn't argue. "You didn't just bury Isla. You buried part of me without permission." "I thought if we moved on quickly, we could survive it." "You moved on. I didn't. And I won't until I heal. That's what I'm doing now." He sat down across from me. His voice was low, different. "I don't know if I can fix any of this." "You can't, but you can leave me the space to fix myself." I told him I was filing for separation, that I had already spoken to a lawyer, that I wasn't angry anymore, just finished. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. He nodded once and walked down the hallway to our bedroom. I didn't follow. Later that evening, Luca came home and ran to me, asking how it went. I told him Isla had her tree now, her stone, her place in the world. He smiled. Then he pulled something from his backpack. It was a drawing. The cherry blossom tree with a little girl sitting beneath it, her hair curled around her cheeks. He handed it to me. "I made it for her," he said, "so she knows we came." I held the drawing to my chest and felt something shift inside me. My daughter was no longer hidden in the dark. She was here in the open under the sunlight and petals and in the heart of a boy who never stopped watching. 3 months later, my home is quieter but not empty. There's no arguing anymore, no clipped conversations or unspoken tension. Gavin moved into a small apartment across town. The official paperwork for the separation is in progress. We talk only about Luca, and even that's mostly through email. Sometimes I catch myself missing the idea of what we were, the version of us I held on to for so long. But then I remember the silence in that cremation center. I remember the way my voice disappeared in the middle of my own grief. And I remember that it was my son, not my husband, who brought the truth back to me. Luca visits Isla's memorial with me every Sunday. It's become our quiet ritual. We bring fresh flowers, sometimes just ones we picked from the backyard. He tells her about his week, what he's learning in school, what he thinks she might have liked. He still draws her. His latest picture was Isla holding a red kite that flies above the tree. When I asked why a kite, he said, "Because they go up but never disappear." That's what Isla is now, present. Not a hidden sorrow, not a wound we tiptoe around, a memory that lives with us, full of love. I have started writing again, journaling at first, then stories. I've always written in pieces, but something opened after I reclaimed Isla. The words come easier now. There's pain in them, but also power. I'm not writing to forget. I'm writing to remember who I am when no one is speaking over me. People talk about closure like it's a final door you walk through. But closure, for me, wasn't about endings. It was about taking back what was mine, my voice, my daughter, my right to grieve on my terms. Sometimes I think about Marlene. She never called after Gavin moved out, never reached out to ask where Isla is now or what really happened. Part of me believes she thought she was doing the right thing, preserving the family image or protecting her son. But I don't excuse her. I won't pretend she didn't take part in trying to erase me from my own child's story. I didn't need her apology to heal. I just needed to stop waiting for it. One day, Gavin sent a letter. Not long, not dramatic, just a few pages, handwritten, delivered by mail. He said he realized now that his version of strength was built on avoidance, that he thought keeping things orderly was a way of handling grief, when really it was fear. He said he couldn't face the mess of pain, so he buried it. Literally, and in doing so, buried me too. He ended the letter with something I didn't expect. I see now that Luca followed me because he still trusts you. That trust kept you connected. It saved her. And maybe, one day, it will save me. I didn't write back. There's nothing I need from him anymore. Not guilt, not regret, not redemption. All I ever needed was to be seen. And I see myself now, clearer than I ever did when I was still trying to make him understand. The memorial garden is starting to fill with blossoms again. The tree above Isla's stone is thick with petals. When the wind moves through, they fall like soft rain. Luca always tries to catch one. Last week, he caught a perfect pink petal in his hand, held it out to me, and said, "This one's for her." I placed it beside the angel statue. For the first time since we lost her, I didn't feel a stabbing pain when I thought of Isla. I felt warmth. I felt love. Not because it stopped hurting, but because the love is louder now than the pain. I tell her I love her every time we leave. I say it out loud, and Luca always echoes me. Love isn't a finish line. It's what remains. That's the lesson I carry with me, that love buried in silence can still be uncovered. That sometimes the smallest voice, the one everyone overlooks, is the one that tells the truth. Isla will never be a secret again. She is ours. She is known. She is loved. And I will never be silent again. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reached you, if it reminded you of your own strength or someone you know who's still finding their voice, please like this video. Share it with someone who might need it. Leave a comment below if you've ever had to fight to be heard, to be seen, or to be believed. I read every single one. And if you want more real stories about healing, truth, and the kind of love that never gives up, subscribe to the channel. There's more to come. You are not alone. Your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for being here.